From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter and what is west of west and the shadows in the east, this is Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Napzok, and I'm about to unveil, if you're watching live on YouTube, a cast of characters, minus one. Lon, I thought about inviting the Maester, but 5 faces is a lot of faces in this digital streaming media age. We're all in. So today, we're joined here on the show by our favorites, Andres Cabrera, Sir Thomas the Tall, Thomas Rissling, and Rachel Cushing live. All right, everybody, let me unmute those mics here. We are going solid here on Casterly Talk. Hello, Rachel, we got to start with you. Let's not bury the lead. Good to have you here live in studio.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be thinking about anything that's not COVID related, that's not to do with my job, that is something I love, and seeing people that I love. And so thank you for making this happen today.
A lot of fun to just sit and talk about the world of Ice and Fire. For those who are relatively new to the podcast or to this YouTube live stream, HBO's Game of Thrones did wrap up, but the world of Ice and Fire goes on. We have a lot of fun looking back here on this show, looking ahead to what's coming, and to, I don't know, those little things called the books, which might have something to do with this world that we all love. Andres Cabrera, good to have you here as well, my Dornish friend.
Yes, I am currently in Dorne. It is hot. It is officially hot season.
Yep.
So I am feeling the desert vibes of Dorne right now with the heat. And I am loving it. I'm officially ready to battle in the sands of Dorne.
Man, I am sipping water like crazy. You and I am at the wall in my heart, and you, sir, even your room, it looks very Dornish. It looks like the water garden.
Yeah. I made sure it had that Dornish vibe. I have the sun spear on my shirt. I mean, that's what this is. It's awesome. all coming together, Ken.
Dude, you are Oberyn Martell of my heart, my friend.
Thank you.
I'll defend. I'll make you wear a helmet any day.
Yes.
And the last person in the crew here today, as his friends are in the chat room live, mocking him already, saying, "I know that."
God, here we go.
Sir Thomas Rissling back on the show live today. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. I'm the opposite of Ace. I'm representing the North as I am. My blood.
Finally, someone
doing my job as I'm supposed to. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I wanted to, before we start taking some questions, we got a great call today. Thomas, you're working on something for us here on the show that going forward we're really excited to talk about. We're going to go a little more detailed into the Dance of Dragons, the big Targaryen Civil War, the Greens, the Blacks, the history, the names, a lot of things, a lot of it found in the book Fire and Blood, which, Rachel, I hear you like that book too, right?
Love that book.
Thomas, what's some of the stuff we're working on and in the weeks forward we're going to be diving into?
So I'm trying to do it as consistent as I can, give it the story as it goes chronologically. So we're hoping to start with kind of the end of King Viserys I's reign, and then head into a bit of an introduction to the Blacks and the Greens, and then slowly dive into the many, many wars that make up the Dance of the Dragons.
I'm excited because even though I've read that book and it's on my shelf and I'm poking through it again right now, I just sometimes the information is so overwhelming that even though we are a year or so out, from this show, House of the Dragon, and by the way, we don't know exactly what it's about. I think it's a good time to just really start getting that lore down. And then, Rachel, I don't know if you would agree here, getting it down, but also letting ourselves float around it just in case there's some changes down the line.
We all know the dangerous paths that expectations bring us.
Yeah.
So, I totally get that. But I love this idea because there's not only the information from Fire and Blood, but there's the 2 short stories he wrote, The Rogue Prince and The Princess and the Queen. So plus anything mentioned in the books themselves. So if you're picking all of the pieces and bringing them together to present, sort of a play-by-play of all of that, I think sounds like A, a lot of fun, and B, really just a good prep for what we expect that show to be.
I think it's going to be fun to dive in and really kind of study the history more than any other kind of world. Game of Thrones, World of Ice and Fire, it rewards you for just kind of appreciating the history. I think you can get a little bit more out of even the broad strokes of the show or anything. I think you kind of can simmer in the juices of the history a little bit more. Is that a statement? I think I saw that on a bumper sticker once. Andres, what your relationship to Fire and Blood? I always have to remind myself, you have read it, you do love it, right? You're on that team, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I am so excited for what I'm going to see on the show as well.
Yeah. Mark in chat, we're recording this podcast live, says at this point, I'm more excited for Fire and Blood Volume 2 than The Winds of Winter. That's a hot take. That's a hot take. But I understand it. Thomas, I'll start with you. Where do you come down on that kind of? I mean, again, we want both. Here's the thing: you don't have to choose. But my emotions are kind of understanding where Mark's coming from.
Yeah, I completely get where he's coming from. At this point, I'm happy with either. Any more writing we get from George is writing I love. So either way, I'm totally happy. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's the truth. It's how I feel.
Yeah, Rachel, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, they're very different styles of writing. They go down different paths. Like Fire and Blood, as dense as it is, still doesn't even hold a candle to how dense the regular books are. And I love history. Ken, we've talked about this. I think it's why we love Fire and Blood so much. So like, I love looking back to see the hints of what's to come. So there's reasons to look forward to both. But Fire and Blood was sort of an unexpected thing that hit.
Yeah.
Like, I think I knew he was writing it, but I didn't understand what exactly it was going to be. And then I just fell so in love with it that it's up to my expectations for him to continue that. But the main series is the main series. And I'm so ready, especially now with the show done and having been able to sit with it for a year, which is crazy to me. Yeah. And everything else. Like, I'm really excited to sort of shift back to Martin and his way of telling the story and how it's all going to flow and everything. So looking forward to both, but for very different reasons.
Look, that's the very mature way to say it. They don't call Mark a maniac for nothing in chat there, right, Thomas? Andres, do you have any? Does your heart lead you one way in these the books here? What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think part of the allure of The Winds of Winter is almost, I mean, I hate to say it, and I hate to be that guy, but I have to almost compare it to what the show delivered. And I know we haven't had Dream of Spring yet, but the idea of almost kind of putting the show and the book side by side to see how far they strayed away from each other, I think that's going to be part of the fun of having the rest of the series of the book. But I think Fire and Blood is kind of that. It has that new NBA star kind of Zion Williamson vibe right now. I hate to do basketball references as I'm wearing my son's t-shirt. But it has that kind of like, who's this new young kid who's so much more fun and exciting that people want to see more of right now.
That's interesting. That's interesting. A couple in live in chat. This is why I like doing the show live. We get some live interaction here. A couple different comments got us going back to the show House of the Dragon, and again, what it might end up being. We've heard some of the rumors. We're gravitating towards the big Targaryen Civil War because it's kind of a centerpiece of the book. But Spud Murphy says Fire and Blood. I think he means the series has to start with the conquest, which kind of was backed up with a prince that wasn't promised. I think it should start pre-conquest. This is we keep coming back to this, but for people who might be watching relatively new or listening to the podcast, Rachel, I want to start with you here. The conquest, Aegon's conquest. I definitely want to see it outside of some of the wonderful animated little docs we've got. I still don't know if that works for me as the start of the series. But what do you think? Where do you think now? That might change, right?
Yeah, definitely. But we do know that Brian Cogman took a stab at a Fire and Blood pilot for HBO, and they passed on it. And then Conlon came along and pitched something different. And Ken and I did a Casterly Talk about this, where we discussed how Cogman's the lore guy. I mean, he's our guy, like, because of that. And so I assume that he really went back to Valyria and started us there and grew us into the story and probably included the conquest. My guess is that Conlon started later, diving into the big moment of Fire and Blood, which is Dance of Dragons, and that was more appealing to the execs at HBO. I think that they don't necessarily need the start. I think that they just want to get to the most Game of Thrones-esque part of Fire and Blood, which is the Dance of Dragons. You've got all the intrigue, you've got the politics, you've got so many dragons, so many Targaryens. You've got houses we recognize, you've got houses that are new. It has a lot more touchstones, whereas going and showing Valyria and the Doom and the going to Dragonstone and the beginning of all that would be slightly new territory. And I think that's why they're not doing the Age of Heroes pilot. I think that they want to do something that is directly tied to Game of Thrones, or more directly tied to, than either doing Valyria, the Conquest, or the Age of Heroes. That's all speculation on my part, but it's just, studios versus creatives, and where do you meet in the middle?
Yeah, look, hey, I still back your play there, Rachel. It makes a lot of sense. But Andreas, can you live in a world where you don't see Aegon and his sister wives on your TV screen?
I mean, how cool would it be to have the Doom of Valyria as like the pilot episode of Fire and Blood? And then in episode 2, we jump to Aegon's conquest, and we jump to what we now know from Fire and Blood. But I think the Doom, the vision, the whole idea of what it was like to live there, I think that would be the coolest thing. Even if, and I get what you're saying, Rachel, because you're spot on. I feel like the more familiar themes and more familiar names and stories that you put in there for audiences that only watch Game of Thrones, the TV show, it helps, audiences tune in a little bit easier versus going back to a time where they might not know unless they either read the book or watch the videos from the DVD extras. But I feel like having that as the first episode would be just an incredible, almost like movie within itself as a pilot to kind of pitch as this crazy, enormous action fantasy show that could almost feel similar to Game of Thrones, but at the same time, its own thing.
Yeah.
I did pitch, sorry, I definitely want to hear what Thomas has to say too, but when Ken and I were just riffing when all of this news came out, I pitched like a Lord of the Rings style prologue that would touch all of those pieces. Yeah. So we'd have a 15-minute Doom, Dana the Dreamer, going to Dragonstone, getting us to Aegon, seeing him step onto, the shore, Blackwater Rush, and like, boom. And then, kind of like touch our way through the Conquest and Aenys and Maegor and get ourselves to Viserys, which is where I think the Dance of the Dragons actually starts. So I agree. Visually, I want to see the Doom. Everybody, who doesn't want to see that? Like, we do. Like, that just, the volcanoes exploding, dragons, that civilization, what did it look like? But I don't know if they want to go full episodes, full seasons dedicated to that.
You guys are winning me over there. Rachel, does your prologue begin with kind of a the world is changing?
If we could get Kate Blanchett to do the VO, I'm on board. That's fine.
Thomas, your thoughts on this idea here? Look, here's the nice thing, Thomas. Any Game of Thrones, World of Ice and Fire stuff is going to be cool.
Yeah, that's pretty much the line.
We win either way. Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to see that prologue. That is an idea I've until you brought this up here. I listened to that episode and forgot about that entirely. I'd love to see that. For me, I feel like we're gonna pick up with some sort of introduction during the end of King Viserys the First's reign.
Yes.
And then they'll use all the similarities in the beginning of the dance that are so similar to the first book and the first season of A Song of Ice and Fire. We right down to a queen trying to keep her son on the throne, right?
Yeah.
So we have all those similarities. I think that's probably most likely where we're going to start, but my preference would be to see that prologue. Prologue
here at Casterly Talk. Got a question live in chat. Then I have a great question for Rachel, the editor. Rachel, the editor. It's like your special Game of Thrones name. That's Queen Rachel, the editor. Heath Jones has an interesting thing here. I'm about 100 pages into Feast for Crows, and I'm finding it hard to get into it at the moment. Should I read Fire and Blood instead and go back to the other later, or continue with Feast for Crows? Assuming you got to choose right now, Heath, I would say read both all day, 12 hours a day. You get through it. Book stuff here. This is Feast for Crows is It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Not that it's bad. It's just, it is, you're going along and suddenly you're over here. We know some of the stories led George to do that stuff. Rachel, I'm going to start with you here. Is Fire and Blood something you should get through now, or should Heath dig in on Feast for Crows?
I'm something of a completist, so I would say stick with Feast for Crows. It was hard for all of us the first time because it's jarring.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about it is that it's a fantastic book, and his new characters are great. Don't let the show fool you. There's stuff in there that does pay off. There's stuff in there that really does fit with everything that he was doing. He just didn't pace it out right. So he ran to the end of all the characters that we knew and then set them aside and then introduced all new characters. And that's inevitably going to be difficult. But I personally think that, put in the work, put in the effort, get through it. And then I can almost guarantee you the next time you read it, you'll love it because there's so much great stuff in there. And then go to Fire and Blood. Like I absolutely, want you to read that too. But I would say, stick it out.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a lot of work here. And I want to come back to a specific question for you, Rachel, to this book, but I want to get Thomas and Andres in on this here. Thomas, should Heath bail out and come back to it at a later time and just dig into Fire and Blood?
I think the joy is if he did decide to do that Fire and Blood is very episodic. The chapters read very one by one. So, you could go read a chapter as a break and then come back to Feast. Feast, I've read it twice and I agree with Rachel entirely. I still found it, for me, to be the hardest read. It felt very long and was very emotionally jarring. Like you said, you bring in a whole cast of new characters and you just feel like you're disconnected almost for me for about 100 pages.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage you to keep reading it, but if you do need a break, go read a chapter of Fire and Blood. Nothing wrong with that.
That's a good. You're a good counselor, therapist for Game of Thrones books, there, Thomas.
I'm stick to it, do it. And Tom's like, no, it's okay. You don't have to.
You finish all 2,000 pages. Andres, any advice, thoughts here?
It's hard coming after Thomas's advice, obviously.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I feel like it's kind of up to him, right? I mean, if he wants to come back to it, as long as he comes back to it, I think that's okay. But at the same time, I feel a lot of what Rachel is saying about just sticking with it and just getting through it and really finding the best that you can find out of it and enjoying what you can and just kind of push through, I guess is kind of always been my attitude. So that's probably my advice as well.
That's push through. It's not a bad thing either there. Rachel, what I wanted to come to back to you, because you are, and Thomas, correct me, you might correct me in your history of the books. I was season 1 and then dove into the books. That's how I came in. We all have different entry points into this wonderful franchise. But Rachel, you are, of all the people, you were the ones who were like, you were back in the day. You were like the 90s. The dream of the 90s was alive in Portland, and your books there, reading there. When you got to Feast for Crows, what was back then? Because I got to it and it was weird, but at least I had some context or some, I had some, part of it was weird of just like, what am I seeing? And season 4 hadn't, I was reading Feast before season 4. Back in the day, what was it like back then where you had waited and suddenly you're like, George had to put a note in it. Like, I know you're missing some of the characters you love. What was it like?
It was really jarring, it's a really interesting prologue. I think that's the Aaron Greyjoy prologue. And so I was like, okay, well, I know who the Greyjoys are. This is an interesting thing. Like, this is going to go into it. But then you're in it for a while and you're like, okay, like these are the brothers and the Kingsmoot and all this stuff. And what does this have to do with everything? You just keep asking yourself, well, what's happening with these other guys? Because we didn't have a sense yet of timelines and how we had pushed past. We'd actually jumped back in time at the beginning of Feast for Crows. And so I'm sure somebody online has actually listed all the chapters chronologically so that you could get a better sense of who is where when. But it was not easy because at that point, you come off of books 2 and 3 and 3 is just so good.
Yeah, no, you're raring to go. You're raring to go.
Everything has just come full head, and you just feel like you're making so much forward progress, and there's so momentum, and you're like, oh my god! And then you feel like you got to a screeching halt, and you're like, and now we're here, and you're why? But there is a why. There is a reason for it, and
Totally
that's
is.
why, like, I say that it's much easier later on, and the show does help give context with that. If people have watched the show and are now visiting the books, you'll have this probably won't seem as jarring to you, but the tangents are worth it. Like the Martells are some of my favorite characters, and it's probably my biggest issue with the show to date is the missed opportunities with the Martells. Ace knows.
Every time I run into Ace at a party, he's just shaking his head going, Ariane Martell, Ariane Martell. They didn't even have Ariane Martell. I have to like put some shrimp in his hand and get him back into the party.
Don't y'all want to see Dark Star on your TV screen? Come on.
Totally. Look, totally. I don't disagree with that at all. Yeah, and reading the book, I remember like the Ariane Martell stuff. I'm like sitting there and I was just like, this is really cool. All right, when are we going to get back to the other stuff I love? You know, and I think sometimes you have to be able to follow the stories to where you want it to go, and find out where it goes there. Thomas, did you have any kind of a similar reaction reading Feast, or were you just like, nah, I'm in?
See, for me, like I came in a little bit later, right? Having been 3 seasons late into the show and then starting then with the books, we were kind of getting to that point. And by the time I got to Feast, I was, like you said, it was eased for me. I didn't have that struggle, but separating the two as I've gotten further into the book lore away from the show lore, rereading it is still difficult. Like I said earlier, it's an enjoyable read, very much so. But like you said, there's even a note to tell you just how jarring it is and prepare you for that. And it's there for a reason.
Yeah. There's some great Cersei stuff in there. I was doing a slow reread, one of those it's on my shelf and I'll just grab it and do kind of not even a whole chapter, just like a section here and there. There's some great Cersei stuff in there. So Heath, one way or another, you're going to get to it there. Here's an interesting question. We have this lot in like Star Wars, like what order should you watch the movies and different generations and how you approach a franchise like that. Eddie Haskell's got a great question here. So when I eventually start GOT, A Song of Ice and Fire, what book do I start with? So obviously that makes sense. A Song of Ice and Fire, you got an order, but with all the other material out there, including Fire and Blood, is there any argument? I'll throw it to any of you first, whoever wants to jump in with the highest bid here. Is there any argument to, start with Fire and Blood? You get some history in you. Like, was there any world, or do you just see, hey, George has it? He kind of takes you into the world pretty well with the book series, with the Song of Ice and Fire.
It's hard because it's like Rachel? You think about it, like how I did it, and I can't remember if Fire and Blood is written in such a way that you could come in cold. Like, is the writing in that book still make enough assumptions about you being familiar with the novels? It might.
That's a good point.
I'd have to look at it through that lens, because it's also a world of Ice and Fire, which is even more so. Like that's like just like a paragraph on something sometimes, and then it moves on. And it can lay out the history of the world. But I think I'd kind of just go with the way that I did it and start with the books, and then Fire and Blood and the short stories and Dunk and Egg and all of that stuff. They fit into that world because you already know it. And so you're just like, these are expansions on it, and maybe some things will click and stuff like that. But like I've never thought about it reading Fire and Blood before the novel.
And I don't know if in the end of the day I'm going to recommend. I think Eddie, you go and you get the book set and you start with the Game of Thrones and you go on down the line with like the rest of us, Clash of Kings, Storm of Swords, all that kind of stuff. It's one of those things. It's like would I don't know. Andres is like, I have that quick little thought. It's maybe fleeting of just like, well, if you read in the book, something that's mentioned in Fire and Blood, and you have that knowledge, would it help it in any way, shape, or form? I don't know. This is water, not vodka, I swear, but it's just a weird, wild thought.
Yeah, I've always preferred just the chronological timeline in general. Like, even when I get that Star Wars question, because obviously we're big Star Wars guys, I always feel like going back and watching the original trilogy first is rewarding, because you get to see the progression of where George Lucas was going, and you get to see the progression of not only storytelling but also visual effects, movies of the time, audience, like what he's going for in each one of his movies. And I feel like that's kind of the same vibe I get from A Song of Ice and Fire, where you get to see what he wanted to do and you see the progression from there. So I'm a big chronological time guy.
No. I brought up this comment. La Ras Casey. I'm saying that so wrong because I want to say it like a Game of Thrones character here. Everything should be watched, read in order of release. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
It was a wild thought.
That's
It was a
what I
wild
do.
thought, Thomas. I withdraw it from the council. All right. Sorry there. Going back up top, we had a question way up there. Here it is from Mark the Maniac there. So what is your favorite small moment in the show, i.e. John and Jorah's chat before Beyond the Wall? Oh, that's a great one. Cersei, Robert, etc. Favorite small moments. I'm springing it on you there. Thomas, do you have an answer here? Something tiny that you like?
There's two from the first season. I go to the show only Robert and Cersei scene, and I go to John on the wall. Those are my two small moments that always stand out. And I don't know if it's just because I finished rewatching the first season, but even before that, I feel like those are the two small moments that really stand out to me.
Oh, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Andres, a small moment.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to define small moment.
I know that's the hard,
that's the point,
because like the big is battles and big moments and stuff but I've said for years that my favorite scene is Jaime and Brienne in the bathtub, where he talks about what really happened with Aerys.
Yeah.
And that's not really small. Like I can think of like when that question made me think for some reason of when Sansa comes down the stairs in the Eyrie after she's made the dress and she had just lied to Royce and saved Peter, and she like her transformation. Like I just remember as terms of like a character visual small just shot. Like that one has always stuck with me, and it's all the worse when you know what happens the following season. But that's what I thought of small. But I think the Brienne Jaime scene could possibly count.
Look.
Yeah.
Anytime I see Jaime Lannister walking into a bathtub, that's not a small moment for me. Okay, Rachel, that's big. Andres, what do you have?
Yeah.
How many Baelish moments can you list on Ace?
I wasn't thinking of Baelish actually. I was thinking of moments like obviously I go straight to Oberyn. Because obviously his big moment is episode 8, The Mountain and the Viper. But I think it's the episode before when he goes to the dungeon with Tyrion, and he has that little moment of kind of telling him his backstory and how he met Tyrion when he was a baby and how Cersei always hated him. That 6-minute scene is one of my favorite all-time Game of Thrones moment, just anything itself, period. I think that one, and then the other Oberyn moment when he talks to Tywin in the brothel.
Yeah.
And they have that little mini deal where they kind of agree to like kill each other at a later time, I guess. But I think that moment is absolutely one of my favorites, and it's also kind of a small moment.
Yeah. I mean, and I thought that Ben Wellington said this conversations are small moments with huge character beats, and some of our choices might. It depends. Again, if you were to do a little Star Wars, I always do like my favorite background Star Wars lines. What is she proposing? And it's metal. Those are tiny moments, and you could find a lot of Game of Thrones moments like that. But it's funny, we are all going to scenes that maybe aren't as loud. There are not as many swords clashing. It's these conversations that we love. In chat, Ranger Donald saying Danny and Sir Barristan's scene about Rhaegar, which is unfortunately when I knew my buddy Barristan was going. And I'm with Hillbilly Scribs here. Big fan of the scenes with Arya and Tywin at Harrenhal. Because Ace, when you and I did that Tywin episode, because we just absolutely love Tywin, even though we're not supposed to. I still, in my head, there's that, I play around, I watch those scenes, I'm like, how much did Tywin really know in those moments? How much did he just kind of figure maybe something was out, or did he play dumb, or did Arya outsmart him enough to where he didn't have any clue? But he knows she's something more than she is, that's for sure. And so it's those little tiny beats all through those conversations that we love, right, Ace?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything with Tywin. I mean, I could even go back to season 1, and it's Tywin's first introduction. Like,
Skinning
my God.
a deer.
It was incredible.
So
I still feel like that is what got me to be one of the biggest Tywin fans. I was like, oh my God, who is this guy? Because that moment is absolutely incredible.
And Ben, great, a gift from the show, not in the books, those Tywin Arya moments. Mark, who asked a question, says, expanding on that small moment with Jon and Jorah, When Danny arrives to save the group, Suicide Squad style, John stays a bit behind to fight for more whites. Jorah yells out, John, which is cool because no one calls John by his name. It symbolizes the two are connected on a personal level, something that rarely happens. It's simple yet significant. Yeah, those are the beautiful, beautiful moments there. And there's many all through the show of those small moments. We'll have to go back at some point. We'll just make a list. We'll actually prepare ourselves, kind of set a bar for what we consider small, or we might just have our favorite conversations as well.
I like that.
Yeah.
We are. I got a question here for you, Rachel, and then we're going to take a call from our good buddy Eric Monroe, who I think is cooking a barbecue dinner, and he commented a few minutes ago. Barbecue dinner is done, so Eric's going to share with the team here. This comes from my Discord server, which is connected to my Patreon page at patreon.com/Ken Napzok. It's from Sarah Rissling. And she says, I would love to know, from Rachel's eye as an editor, which episode or episodes did she feel were the best edited? Now, Rachel, this is what you do by trade. You're very good at it. You are an award-level editor, where I'm just an iMovie amateur. So we have to defer to your knowledge on this. What as an editor, what episodes have you been drawn to?
Well, I've always said that the best editing is showcased the most in two different kinds of scenes: battle scenes, and any scene that is about building tension toward a payoff. Editing really plays a huge role in both of those. So it's very easy to go to Watchers on the Wall, Battle of Bastards, The Long Night, The Bells. And actually, I was thinking about The Bells because, Ace, I remember when we were talking about it, when we were doing our recaps, there's the oneer of Arya, and it was supposed to just follow her through the streets. But then the editor, whose name is Tim Porter, chose not to stick with it, but to intercut her with the mountain fighting the Hound. And because thematically that actually worked better, but that was not the intention. That was the editor and probably the director working through it and realizing that intercutting was the better way to tell the story than to actually showcase, which was a pretty damn cool shot, like oneer of her stumbling through the streets of King's Landing during the battle. But I have two answers. I've always said my favorite battle is one that combines the battle editing and the tension editing, and that's Hard Home. That is one of my favorite scenes in the whole series because, as Ken often says, something's wrong, but you don't know what. You know that the clock is ticking, but you don't know to what. And then you hear the dogs barking, and then it just starts to build, and you're so tense. It gets me every time. And then when it breaks out and it's the frenzy of battle, this is why the Battle of Bastards is really well edited too. It's that thin line between I don't know what's happening because you don't in a battle, because it's that kind of crazy chaos, but I can follow what's happening because it's a TV show and I need to be able to follow what's happening. So it's that balance. And then the other piece that I always think of, and this is also because I just rewatched this episode, The Winds of Winter, the season 6 finale, the first opening 7 minutes to the music by
Ramin Djawadi,
the Light of the Seven, and it's Cersei's plan to blow up the Sept. And that, again, I have goosebumps. There's very little dialogue in that. There's just a lot of perfect shots, perfectly edited to that music, and you're just building, and you're like, what is gonna happen? And it's gorgeous, even though it's heinous, what she does, but it's something else. And to have Battle of the Bastards and the Winds of Winter be the 1-2 punch of the end of that season, hats off. Yeah, that's crazy.
Great answers all around, Rachel. Your insight into the process and different styles of editing is as I would expect. Great. You're talking about the Winds of Winter moment. It's like the sip of wine heard around the world from Cersei. That is perfectly paced. Yep. The amount of time that shot comes in and it isn't. She's not. Everything from acting, directing, and the editing of it, all of it put together. That's a great example because they always say you make these movies and TV shows 3 times: the writing, the actual shooting, and then it's remade again in editing. That's the final piece to make it so beautiful. That's a great moment. Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo everything you said, Rachel. That moment and the fact that it ends with, obviously we cut to the Cersei wine moment, which is literal perfection, but the fact that it ends with Tommen, which is even more like, you're just like, oh my god, what happened? And then I think it cuts to audio by Walder Frey, right? Am I correct with that?
Yeah, the scene ends with Tommen, and then you cut to the scene with Jaime and Walder Frey celebrating the fall of River Run.
And I almost feel like the audio comes in first, where you hear his line. You hear Walder Frey's line. I believe he says something about celebrating a victory while Tommen is like, while it's still on the window shot, and you're just like, what is going on? It's absolutely incredible. That scene is fascinating. I want to echo real quick mine. I always go back because there's so many great oneers. Like the Arya Stark one is incredible. The Braun one on the train battle, the season yes, episode 4 is a great oneer when he's getting chased by the Thraki. And then my favorite one is still Watchers on the Wall. That oneer is incredible when it goes over the wall. But my favorite is still the Battle of the Bastards, the one with Jon Snow following right behind him as he's going through the horses and like literally everyone flying all over his face. It's literally like maybe 8 or 10 seconds, but it's still so freaking well choreographed and incredible. I love that one.
Stuff. Yeah, Rachel, what program do you think they're using? iMovie 9 or is it Paint?
They're using the TikTok editor.
Yeah, right. You know what's crazy? There's only 8 editors that worked on all 8 seasons.
Wow.
And I think they did the editorial in England. I'm not 100% sure, but I kept looking up like my favorites. And an editor named Tim Porter did a lot of the bigger episodes that I'm talking about. But I looked, and the entire series, all of those episodes, only 8 people were the editors on it, so they knew it so well.
This is I'm showing my simple brain here, but Rachel, that's just got to be them as showrunners and producers and writers and directors feeling a rhythm with those 8 souls, right? It's just
because especially because you also notice too that like they would bring in new directors in like the middle seasons, but it still felt like a family of directors, and they kept bringing people back. And then when you have 2 people like David and Dan overseeing the whole thing, and then the documentary that came out, you see a lot of people have seen the whole series through. You know, the longer a series goes on, if you still have the same people, then you still have the same bones. So you're still building on the same foundation that you created in the beginning. And in the rhythm of that, there's probably a lot more trust there too. Like if you only have 8 editors, that means they're each editing 2 to 3 episodes a season. That's a lot because these are mini movies. And so I have to imagine that David and Dan trusted these people pretty implicitly. And I have to imagine that these editors, are some of the best in the game because they knew that so well, and that they were able to go off and just edit the show without having somebody constantly breathing down their necks with everything, because all the pieces are going all year long, all the same time for 8 years. Like that's how 10 years really, that this show got made. So.
It blows my mind. I started going to through this film school process, did 2 years screenwriting, film production, wanted to be a director. And then the first time they sat me down in an editing room and was like, oh, this is where most of the work is. It was like, I'm going to go do radio and stand-up comedy. Thank you. You editors, Rachel, you really do make, you make this stuff. You're talking about that scene with Arya running and then just an editor, Tim going, you know what will work? How about this? And that's the beauty of the process there. We're going to get to this phone call with our friend Eric soon, but Mark's on fire today. Mark Kameyer in the chat room, man. He's got some good questions there. Thomas, I know you work with Mark, and Mark used to call in a lot to Day of the Thrones and clearly contributes here to Casterly Talk, but is Mark really a maniac? Is that true?
Yes. If you want to hear Mark rant, you'll find our stuff.
Okay. He asked this question. It's a tough one. Would you prefer someone new or have composer Ramin Djawadi return for House of the Dragon? This is similar to some of the Star Wars stuff. John Williams, going back to episode 7, it made sense that he was there. And then they go to Rogue One, they go a different direction. It was a tough sell. It still might be a tough sell for some people. Thomas, can you imagine any Game of Thrones related TV show and not having Ramin's music behind it?
Only if it's Howard Shore. That's I hate to give you a short answer, but only.
I like that answer.
Can get that lucky to have Howard Shore on television. Who knows? Maybe. Hopefully.
I like that answer, Andres.
Oh man, it's tough because you always want to stay true to what you've heard before, especially with someone like Jawadi. But at the same time, Ken, I think about Ludwig, right, with Star Wars and The Mandalorian, who kind of came in and he's like this young kid who's probably 2 or 3 years older than me, who's now this stud composer who tried to bring in a new style and a new energy to Star Wars. Who knows? Maybe there's someone unknown who can come in and just create something completely original.
I love that answer. I love that answer. We're obviously going to talk a lot about Star Wars, and when I'm talking Star Wars, I talk a lot about Game of Thrones. It's just these two worlds are big and similar. With the Rogue One score, they had a Desplat had a Mark Riley's not here. I'll say it wrong. Then the last second switch and Giacchino comes in, and then I love the solo score, John Powell, but he also takes a lot of Williams motifs and themes and works them very well into that. But Ludwig Göransson, you're right. It's so memorable and it's so different, but it also feels Star Wars. That's what could possibly happen, Rachel, if we are brave enough to step outside of our little boxes as fans with a new show, with a new composer, right?
Yeah, my guess is we're not quite there yet. Because this is whatever comes next is the first spinoff. We've only had the original at this point. So, and like we were talking about with what we think House of the Dragon is going to be about, I think they still want to play things safer. And so I think that they would prefer to keep Jawadi and the reason why I definitely want to keep him, and if they go with somebody else, to go with somebody that has an international flavor to his music. Like, he uses very interesting instruments and sounds and things that are have a more international feel to them than somebody like, I adore John Williams, but you recognize a John Williams score like that because of the strings,
Yeah.
And so, I hope whatever happens next, that they keep that international, really interesting instrument usage flavor to the Game of Thrones scores. But my guess is they will keep Jawadi as long as they can, but that down the road, when they've had a few series and a few movies and a few and then they're ready to go, let's try a left turn. Let's try an out there concept with a different set of people and something like that.
I'm all for
That's
it.
my guess.
The only thing, my big final answer push comes from the fact that I want Jawadi to do it so that when I go to the Game of Thrones concert experience, he has that much more music to play.
Yes, those are amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
Ranger Donald Long says, "Would you like the same style opening intro?" It'd be that same thing, man. It'd be really weird for me to sit down and not hear. I get a different theme, but to not see a map in motion, you have to be open to that kind of stuff. You have to let their creativity flow, but it would be a little weird, I think.
And that's so helpful. I don't know. Yeah. Ken and I are map people. We love maps.
There's a lot of map people here today.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page that love that the map is not just cool to look at, but helpful. Where is Winterfell compared to King's Landing, compared to what's happening in Essos? The scale wasn't exact, but you still got a sense of moving around the world and where our different locations are in relation to each other. And I think that's important to the stories that you're telling when you're interweaving stories that are half a world away from each other.
Yeah.
I think that's especially important in a prequel, right? To show you the exact same places or places that are related to it and where they are now during this timeline. I think that'll be crucial to audiences who might be confused as far as what's going on and when it's going on. And when they see where the places that they're used to and how it looks now, I think that'd be kind of interesting.
I think there's also the possibility of, the original open that they had done for the show was following the Raven fly around. I wouldn't mind seeing a version of that with the dragon. If we're doing House of the Dragon.
Yeah, lean in.
How much the content has changed.
That's a winner. I like that. That's a winner, Thomas. You get the big win here today for that one. There.
It's the POV dragon shot.
POV. Who doesn't want a POV dragon shot? Okay, we are going to go to this call here, and when I do that, I bring up this so that we can. You don't have to just see our faces staring. I also have to do a weird adjustment on the fly due to an update needed on the board. So bear with me if you're listening or watching live. You might hear an echo for a second here, but we're going to play this call from our friend Eric Monroe.
Hey, Ken and Casterly Talk. First off, Ken, I want to wish you a very happy belated birthday. So, there are so many crazy Game of Thrones theories out there. We've talked about many of them back on Daily Thrones and now on Casterly Talk. And I think out of all the theories, though, the one I wish would have come true was that Serial Pharrell was Jaqen H'ghar. And I will tell you why. Because Arya's story with the House of Black and White, I totally get it. It was necessary. Definitely had its moments, like the killing of Samara and Trent. I love that. But it wasn't my favorite part of the show. I much preferred her adventures with the Hound and her stuff with Tywin in season 2. But had the big twist and reveal been that Jaqen H'ghar was Serial Pharrell the whole time, it might have made it all worth it for me, especially during rewatches. So for you, which crazy theory do you wish would have come true?
All right, that's a good question. What crazy theory? We have a lot of fun as fans. We freeze frame shadows and go, look, Serial Pharrell is back. There's a shadow on the wall. It's got to be him. And that's fun, and I never want that to stop. But sometimes it creates disappointment. Other times, you're like, ooh, what could have been? And that's just a natural instinct to have when you're watching all this stuff. So what do you think, Thomas, I'll start with you. What's a wild theory that you would have loved to have seen come true, even if it was completely impossible?
I actually think this is one of the more likely ones. It's the idea of Robb dying twice. That's one that I've always been attached to. I loved Robb Stark despite his errors. And the idea of that character dying twice was heart-wrenching for me. And I think in the books it plays almost more to that possibility than it does in the show.
I like that answer. Andres, what do you have?
Yeah, I was going to say, if that happened, I think too many hearts would be beyond repair.
I included.
Yeah. You know what's a funny one that you guys, I don't even know if you guys know about this one, but this is one that's in the Littlefinger Reddit that I'm in. It's the whole like Littlefinger didn't get killed one, and he's actually going to come back. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but apparently it was a lot of people threw it around, but it was this whole idea that like Littlefinger hired this faceless man to like somehow take his place using magic to make it look like it was Littlefinger, but in reality he wasn't there, and he paid someone off and he was somewhere else and he was planning his plot for the throne. It was a crazy, crazy theory. And it was literally just that Littlefinger fan in me that wanted to believe it. But beyond that, it was just completely unreasonable. But just having that Littlefinger fan in me, I would have loved to see Littlefinger just show up at the end of season 8 and be like, by the way, I win. And I'd be like, yes.
Love that. I love that. Rachel, I want to close with yours here because it's we're so happy to have you here today. My silly ones, they're not these Reddit threads. They're not these kind of long held ones. They're like watching the show and thinking this is going to happen. Without a doubt, the theory that Stannis was and still is alive, I can't let go of. Right? I mean, we
never
all
saw the killing blow.
I know we all here agree with that, or maybe it's just me and Eric in chat. We didn't see him go, so Stannis is going to emerge here in season 9, end of season 9. But the one I had, and this is where you read the books and things are a little different, and you have that knowledge and you understand it, and maybe you can forget that the producers never intended to go every little detail in the books, and so you can get lost. I love Mance Rayder. And Kieran Hines is so great in every scene, every line he has is it Gran and Mag and Gran, all those moments. So when he goes and he dies, I'm in a hotel room in Las Vegas with two of my friends, Paul and Jay, Jay a lot of times watches the show. We're in a hotel room. They hadn't read the books, and they were a little less concerned about spoilers. Mance dies. John puts that arrow. Boom! It's a great moment. Great ending. And I'm like, oh, he's not dead. Oh, no. They got. See, the guy behind him. That's just this rattleship.
Rattleship.
And see, and there's this and there's this switcheroo, and there's this thing, and then it leads to this, and then he's the ghost of Winterfell, and don't worry, he's not dead. I had to face that fact pretty quick to that theory. Me in that hotel room in Las Vegas at the Gold Coast Casino with our friends down there playing the Game of Thrones slots, actually, going, don't worry, Mance is coming back. I know. I read the books. You have to let that go. I still wish that theory was true. I still wish I got to see some of that stuff on the show. Rachel, what do you have for theories that aren't true that maybe you want?
Okay. I have A silly one and a serious one, a more serious one. The silly one is I sort of loved when people were really playing around with Bran being able to travel through time in some way, shape, or form,
Yes.
like when he travels back to the Tower of Joy and he yells his father's name, his father turned and looked. So a lot of people were saying when he had that barrage dream sequence when he touched the heart tree, he saw the Mad King. And a lot of people thought, well, oh my God, did Bran whisper to Aerys, burn them all, and thus driving Aerys to actually do what he did back then to set everything in motion? I was like, I kind of don't hate that. It's crazy, but what they had set up with Hodor and like the self-fulfilling, like what happened didn't happen until this happened, like that time travel aspect of it, kind of buy into all of like he's actually the Night King or all the brands throughout history, but this was another just more simple. Maybe it was a domino that he was involved in that I kind of liked, and then I still struggle with where Cersei and Jaime ended and the lack of Valonqar, and even with like whether or not it ends up being the Cleganes in the books or is the actual little brother big brother situation, but the fact that Jaime wasn't the one who killed Cersei. Like, to me, that just felt like it was supposed to happen and everything was leading there. And then that little sidestep that the show did, I still don't feel was earned. I get what they were trying to do, but I don't think they set all of the things in motion to get us there. And I just think the most poetic, heartbreaking, but full circle thing that could have happened is if Jaime was the one to kill Cersei.
Man,
but that's
Rachel wants to see murder.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I love some theories here in chat. Prince that wasn't promises. My favorite crazy theory was that Mance is Rhaegar. I love that too. Mance, they like playing the same instrument right there. We got this one from Rob. Varys is a merman.
That got a lot of traction.
That was a popular one.
It was. And going to Littlefinger there, a fan of Littlefinger starting the rumor that starts a rebellion, which, hey, we know he had a lot to do with a lot of things there, man. That's part of the reason you love him, Ace, right? People in chat are concerned about your love of Baelish.
I know.
Just like my love of Stannis.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of hate for that.
It's okay, man. Yeah. We make our stands in life. We choose what we fight for. And you have chosen Peter Baelish, and that's quite all right. All right, we are almost out of here. I want to thank everyone who watched live in chat. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, like the video if you want to. If you're watching later, do so. Leave us a nice comment or a mean comment. I'll just delete it, but I'll save the nice ones. I appreciate you guys all watching. There's a lot of streaming. I feel like the local news. There's a lot of streaming options these days. We're happy you've chosen us. This is, though, first and foremost, a audio podcast. Remember, just audio, and that's available on Anchor and iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and a lot of other places. Casterly Talk goes on. We are going to be taking a deeper dive into the events of the Targaryen Civil War. One of many. We know the Targaryens like fighting, but the big one that might be the centerpiece of the forthcoming show, or maybe it's not, but we're going to dive into it. Thomas is going to help us with that. Andreas is going to come back on and talk about all the things he loves and all the frustrations. And Rachel, we know you're busy. We know you're busy doing that wonderful editing thing, but we're going to try to work it out. We might have some supplemental shows with you soon on different nights or different times to get you talking Game of Thrones and World of Ice and Fire stuff, because I know you love it and you're great at it. So we are almost out of here. Tell everyone where they can find you, starting with you, Mr. Sir Thomas the Tall.
You can find me on Twitter at Thomas Rissling and all things podcast related at FTM Podcast Feed on Twitter as well.
Got some cool stuff going over there. You guys are feeding some monsters. I like it. Andres Cabrera.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Squad Leader Ace, and obviously my YouTube channel First Cut, where you can find the Meeting of Podcast.
Love it. Check out everything they're doing there. And Rachel Cushing, where can they follow you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Rachel J. Cushing, and I'm popping up on as many of these streams and feeds with my friends as I possibly can, because it's what's getting me through the days. So hopefully I'll see you around.
we want to help you get through those days, Rachel. Continue doing all your hard work. It's appreciated by us out here, even though it's it's behind the scenes stuff. It's not all winning movie trivia championships for you. You got some real work to do. We appreciate it. If you want to follow more of my adventures, go to kennapzok.com or follow me at Ken Napzok. New baseball podcast, Box Score Heroes, coming very soon. Getting some art, putting it all together. A feed entirely about baseball. It's like my 7th grade dreams came true. So we'll see you soon. We'll see you next time. This was Casterly Talk.